What is shaking? It's week 3, day 17, impact week, and we are going to talk about a macro makeover. So if you've used a MyFitnessPal or one of the macro tracking apps or calorie tracking apps, this is basically how to do it yourself. If you're not someone that likes technology or wants to use apps, I do not myself. This is going to be a way that you can do it yourself. And also it's going to be a good process for you to go through to kind of see how to construct your nutrition plan based on the option you choose in this flexible forever program. So this is the one-stop solution for macro makeovers. So on the last video, which was yesterday, which you may have watched earlier, we talked about calories in. Real quick recap on that. I did want to cover some calories in considerations now that you understand how many calories you should be taking in, which we figured out in yesterday's video. If you missed it, go back and check that out. But calories in considerations that I use my filter, because there's so much information out there, and I'm going to do a specific post and it's explained in the First Steps manual. But just a recap, what I do when I'm factoring what I'm going to put in my mouth, I put it through 3 filters. Filter number 1, what is the maximum variety and quantity of nutrients? And that includes phytonutrients, micronutrients, polyphenols, vitamins, minerals, all those things that I can put in my mouth for the calories I'm eating. So real quick, leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, best bang for your calorie buck right there. That's why you should eat a lot of those. Calorie in consideration number 2, which you've heard me talk a lot about, is the glycemic index and the insulinogenic index. Basically, how fast something will raise your blood sugar and how much insulin it will trigger your body to produce. So those are 2 things to understand: the insulin index, the glycemic index of foods, and how those will impact your body. One little aside on that is you may not know that red meat actually has a high insulin index, higher, not crazy high, but higher than other proteins, but a very low glycemic index. So interesting, just a side note there, something to be aware of. But if you haven't learned, protein through gluconeogenesis can produce blood sugar and ultimately be stored as fat. So if you eat too much protein and surplus calories, there's no 100% safe solution if you don't have your calories in dialed in. And finally, calorie in consideration number 3, and arguably probably the most important, a lot of books are coming out on this right now, and science and research, is the inflammation factor and the oxidation factor. So oxidation, how you cook your foods. Fried foods, very high oxidation factor, just something to be aware of. Sugar, very high oxidation factor. Inflammation factor, that's this research coming out about lectins, inflammatory foods that are going to upset your gastrointestinal system, causing inflammation. And if you want to get into the science, go through that leaky gut, permeate into your body, causing an autoimmune response or an immune response, and therefore inflammation. So that's some things to consider, and that's for you to know. I did the work for you and did the research and how I came up with my food traffic light system. And so those are all considerations that are factored in. So that's one of your downloads, and save you a lot of research figuring all that out. But just wanted to recap that. Let's get into macro makeover. And just to recap, in the program, you are given the flexibility to choose how you're going to construct your daily routine. The best kind of diet in the world is the one that you're going to stick with. And this is a forever transformation. So we want something that's realistic, not just for today, not just for next week, but forever. So for some of you, that may be 3 meals a day. For some of you, it may be 5 meals a day. For some of you, it may be 1 meal a day. So I'm going to teach you, depending on which option you choose, how to construct your daily macro breakdowns for the day based on how many meals you're picking. So for simplicity today, I'm going to use a 3-meal plan. And the good news is I'm not going to go through all the math. I've already done it on the screen over there, but I'm going to show this for you. But let's just kind of walk through the process. I'm actually going to use one of my clients, health coaching clients, Donna. I got her folder here. And just went through this exercise with her this week, so kind of interesting. We used that same calories out calculation system that we did in the last video, and then based on her goal, we came up with a calorie in, and for her, that was her daily calorie goal of 1389. And remember, she's also going to do intermittent fasting with calorie restriction, so that's going to free up some extra calories, but for the purpose of this exercise, 1389. Now, if you can slide over, you probably can't see this, but in your program materials, you were given the option, if you are in the weight loss phase, for the max weight loss option, which I call Activate, and that breaks down with a macro percentage of 35% fat, 55% protein, and 10% carbohydrate. Why 55% protein? If you watched yesterday's video, you understand the thermic effect of food. So we're jacking up the protein to increase the thermic effect of food from protein. So more calories from protein. Not something I would recommend for the long haul, for longevity purposes, but to get the weight off, it will accelerate the process because of that TEF effect. For most people, slow and steady wins the race. That's what I advocate. That's what I recommend. That's going to be your keto flex. 45% fat, 35% protein, 20% carbohydrate. So not a classic ketogenic 5 to 10% calories from carbohydrate type diet. That's why I call it keto flex, because we're going in and out of keto to create those ketones, but also teach the body how to burn fat. And if you are in maintenance phase, which is designed for long life based on current research from Mark Hyman, Dr. Stephen Gundry and his longevity paradox, so much research. If I aggregated all that, I came up with what I would determine the long life maintenance plan, and that would be 55% of your calories from fat, 25% protein, and 20% carbohydrate. So depending on which phase you are in and which phase you choose, that's going to be how you break down the macros. For the purposes of this, I'm using the regular Keto Flex for my client here with her daily calorie goal of 1389. So then you would break down from that number the percentages on the macronutrients. All right, hopefully you're following along. So of these calories, 45% are fat. So that's how that is. This is fat, this is protein, this is carbs. FPC. So 45% of this number, basically, if you don't remember simple math, times 0.45, 13 equals, and you would get that number. For her, that would be 440. Hopefully that number's right, because I'm not checking the math. But if it's not, you can do the math, and you're going to be using your numbers anyway. And that would be your calories. And then the same we would do for protein at 0.35, and that comes out to be a different number. Actually, I realized I didn't even use that. We were doing the max for her. So scratch these numbers and we'll just keep rolling. So it doesn't matter. Do the math. So we're doing this 1389 times 0.35. Get that number there. And then same for carbohydrates. 1389 times 0.20 equals this number. And then that's going to give you your caloric breakdown for each day of the program. So remember 1389 would be, she's doing a 5 and 2 plan. So on her 5 regular days, 1389. So this breakdown, on her 2 fasting days, she is doing 750 calories on those days. So still going to break down the same percentages, but that's how you would construct those meals. So right now we have the 45% fat, 35 protein, 20%. Now to determine the actual macronutrients of those, here's your fat, this is protein, and this is carbs. So there are 9 calories per gram in fat. So it's more calorie dense, something to be aware of. So of the 440, and again, that number's off, it's 50%, so it's probably closer to 700 and something. But anyway, we're rolling. You divide that number by 9, and that would give you your fat grams per day. And then the other 2 you divide by 4 and get your grams of protein and your grams of carbs. And then you need to know those numbers. So basically you have your calories of each and your grams of each. So calories and gram information. So you understand where you're at. Think of those as buckets. Your calorie bucket or your gram bucket, whatever one floats your boat. But you're going to need to go through this exercise to understand what you're taking in. Because if you don't have a clue there, you're, like most studies have shown, people are up to 1,000 calories off on what they estimate they're taking in. So you have to at least go through the work for 2 weeks, is what I recommend, of doing your calorie calculations, measuring, I'm not suggesting you buy a gram scale, but you need to understand portion sizing so you understand what you're taking in. So from that, once you have your calorie bucket and your gram bucket figured out, so that's your budget for the day of those. And then depending on which of the options you chose, let's just say for this example, she wants to do 3 meals a day, and then so you're going to break those down. Now it flexes even more. If you want to divide those evenly and do 33% of your calories at each meal, you can. If you're like me, I'm not a big eat a lot of calories at breakfast type person. So I actually only have in about 15% of my calories at breakfast, and then I would do 35 at lunch, and so that leaves 50 for dinner and or an afternoon snack. So you have the flexibility to break that up however you want. So you have to kind of decide, what is realistic for you and your lifestyle and based on how many meals. So if it was 4 meals or 5, you break that down even further, which I'll show you in my example. But continuing right along, so this is a 3 meal a day example. Then you would break that down, grabbing, if you want to use calories or grams, you would break that down 15% of each of those to get your fat, protein, and carbs for that meal, your fat, protein, and carbs for this meal, and your fat, protein, and carbs for that meal. And so it's basically taking, whether you're doing calories or grams, you would multiply from whatever is in the bucket times 15%, times 35%, times 50% to get, the calories for each of these meals. Then you would figure out the percentages based on 45, 35, 20 to figure out these numbers. So good news is we're not going to go through that. I have an example on the screen and one I've already did for a client. He's actually in the Activate plan trying to put on muscle. So eating actually a little bit more calories than his maintenance level. So let's slide on over to this, if you can see this on the screen. So this is for a male that's trying to put on a little bit of muscle and take off fat, but not a huge makeover. He's been through basically he's kind of in that quality phase of just fine tuning. I call it getting out the brush and the chisel and just working on his six pack. So he is a fast metabolizer, likes to eat meals frequently. So this is a little more involved, but 5 meals a day. So that's probably an extreme example. 6 if you want to get really crazy, but something for most people is not realistic. And that's the good news. They've done studies and shown that it doesn't matter if you divide your calories in 2 to 3 to 4 or 5. If all things else being equal, the relative impact is going to be the same. So if you want to divide it into more frequent meals like this client, you can. But taking his daily calorie goal of 2,600, I did the percentages of fat, protein, carbohydrate, and in terms of calories, so 1170 fat, 910 protein, 520 on the carbs. And then I divided those by the relevant calorie per gram, 9 for fat, so that's 130 grams of fat, 227 grams of protein, and 130 grams of carbohydrate. So hopefully you're following along with me. So then we structured his day based on his pre-workout meal, so he didn't want a lot of calories, his post-workout meal, a before lunch snack or mid-afternoon, then lunch or then dinner, and then after dinner snack. So that's kind of the construction of 5 meals, and then 15%, 25%, 15%, 30%, 15% allocation of total calories from his daily calorie goal. And then we broke out the percentages, calories and grams for each meal. So you have the same planner in your toolbox so that you can construct whether you're doing the 1, 2, 3, or up to 5 meals a day. You can basically do the same math and work this out for yourself. So the examples are in there. Hopefully this was helpful in figuring out your macro makeover for your specific goals. And just make sure it's realistic. If you're not somebody that's going to prep and Tupperware out 5 meals or use a meal prep service, it's just not going to be realistic to carve out. Or if you got a crazy schedule where you just can't carve out time to eat 5 times a day, do not even try to force yourself to do a 5 meal a day program. That's just not realistic. So reality is the ultimate filter in terms of making this work for the long haul. So hopefully that's helpful, and make sure you do the math, do the work for a couple weeks so that you kind of get an idea. And last thing I'm going to sign off with is just the good news, which I shared with a seminar I was doing last week, is that in my entire life, other than a couple 2-week periods when I was bodybuilding, I never measured or counted calories or gram weighed my food. The whole time I did go through that exercise of a week, kind of figuring out portions, what they weighed, getting my macros right. But then I was able to eyeball it from there on. And here's a quick, simple rule of thumb, which I've pointed out in the First Steps manual, and I'm going to point out right here, right now. Again, when you're picking your fat, a good rule of thumb for a tablespoon of fat is about the size of your thumb. So depending on the fat, understand how many grams per tablespoon of fat and calories that particular fat has. My strategic fats that I recommend: avocado, olive oil, coconut oil, grass-fed butter are kind of my favorites. And then you would get into walnuts, which do have a little bit of protein, but I consider them a strategic fat in my book. So if you're doing 2 tablespoons of walnuts, 2 thumb-sized portions, you kind of get the idea. All right, going on to protein, fat, protein, carbs. Protein, a good rule of thumb for portion sizing, is the size and thickness of your palm without the fingers. So that is basically about a 6-ounce hamburger patty if you kind of look at mine, but use yours as a guide because nature kind of helps dictate the right amount of calories for you and the right amount of macronutrients. So protein, about the size and thickness of your palm. If you are having a resistant starch, and that's on your plan for the day or that particular meal, for you, a good rule of thumb for tubers, resistant starches, is the size of your fist for portion sizing, okay? And then finally, for those leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, those high nutrients per calorie buck type foods, 2 handfuls. So basically, you can't really go wrong. Like, I'll eat a bag of spinach as a side dish for dinner 3 nights a week, especially if we buy the big tub and it's sitting there. I'll put in half of one, wilt it down with some olive oil. Don't put the olive oil in there when you're cooking it. Always add it afterwards because of the oxidation effect. But those are pretty forgiving because it's a high nutrient, high fiber food, low carbohydrate, lots of water content. So you can go high volume on those things and just be conscious of the calories, because in fat it's going to add up quickly. And then also the fat content and protein you have to consider as well. So if it's a fatty or meat, just keep in mind 8-ounce ribeye is going to have a lot more calories than, say, an 8-ounce sirloin because of the fat content. So make sure you start learning more about that. In the next video, we're going to talk about the new nutrient labels or nutrition labels and the nutrition facts, so that you can start to understand how to read those and starting to know your nutrition. And as well as restaurant menus are around the country are also putting nutrition information on there as well. So we're going to go into that in the next video. That's going to be a quickie, so you can use those tools all the time. And looking forward to it. Keep rocking Impact Week, and we will see you on the next video. Have a great day.